There is nothing more profitable in our society today than a sick child.
Hey everybody, how you doing tonight? Hey rock girl. I'm not sure what listen only is. As you can tell, I'm not overly skilled at all this technology stuff. But welcome to my channel. Hopefully there's a few people signing in. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of it, just want to maybe give a little bit of an intro as to why I've chosen this topic tonight, because it may seem like, you know, it's an American thing, right? Because it's RFK Jr. But it's not really. At least I don't think it is. I think it's a North American thing, maybe even a world thing, but definitely a North American thing. I get the impression that it really affects Canada as well. And of course, what we're talking about, or what I'm talking about tonight, hopefully what you guys are going to be joining in on the conversation about, is excuse me, true environmentalism, and what's happening to our bodies, our kids, and what it means to our economy, and how it's kind of in conflict with a lot of things that the Canadian government and other Canadian governments or other governments around the world are trying to feed us. Hello, Harley. So we have all these environmental things that are going on, and really it seems like we're governed by a bunch of radicals and people who just have one agenda. And one of the things that was said by RFK Jr. this week on Tucker, and I'm going to be using some clips from Tucker, was that basically it's a bit of a boondoggle. They're lying to us, and it's all about they want to convince us that carbon is the only thing. And really carbon, I don't think that carbon is really the issue at all. But I mean, and I never used to be a carbon denier, I guess. But the more and more I dig into it, the more and more I delve into it, the more and more I think that we're just all being sold a bill of goods. What really we should be thinking about is a lot of the things that are going on with our environment and other things like healthy food, healthy water, healthy air, that kind of stuff. And it seems like all those things have been put on the back burner. One of the things that really interests me about this is I used to have a lot of migraines, and I still get the occasional migraine, but not all that often. And one of the reasons why I brave, yeah, Mike says, yeah, RFK Jr. is brave but weird. He is a little weird. I don't think that I'm not sure I would support him for president, but I think he's got a lot of good things to say, and he does have a place in the government of Trump. But get back to what I was saying about my migraines. I used to have them like 2 or 3, 4 times a year. Now I hardly have them at all. And it started when I was a kid, after a visit to Niagara Falls. We went underneath the falls, and I had this splitting headache. And then I didn't have one again until later in life. But a few years ago, probably about, well, it's getting up there now, 7 years ago or so, a friend of mine, she was on keto, and she told me about keto and that it had actually stopped her migraines. So I went and started this keto, and it really put an end to a lot of my migraines. And it got me thinking about what I eat and what my kids eat and whatnot, and all of the health things that go along with that. Because every time I go off of keto, it doesn't take me long before I get a migraine. And I really think that real food is the issue, because we have so many things in our diet. Now, I played a little clip. Hello, Dave. Thanks for joining us. I played just a small little clip at the beginning, but here's a longer clip. And it's really interesting what RFK Jr. has to say about the really about the health industry. And I think that it applies to Canada too. And one of the reasons why I think it applies to Canada is we're so tied to the US in our environment. I think we're cleaner. I don't know if we are, but I think we're cleaner because we have a lot more space. But I think it is. I think it's really important that we recognize that carbon isn't our major issue, and we could. I think listening to RFK, he makes a lot of really good points, especially when it comes to how much money that we spend on health. And if you consider that in the US, they spend more on health than they do on their military. And of course, we all know that they're a mega military country. They spend so much money on their military. They spend more on health, and if they could cut that down, then maybe they wouldn't have a problem with their budgets and their economy, and maybe we wouldn't either. So take a listen at this, what he had to say, then we can talk about it a little bit.
What is causing the corruption at FDA, at USDA, that the capture of those agencies by the processed food industry, by the chemical industry, by the pharmaceutical industry, that actually profit on sick children. One of the things that Callie says, there is nothing more profitable in our society today than a sick child, because all of these entities are making money on them. The insurance companies, the hospitals, the medical cartel, the pharmaceutical companies have lifetime annuities. Any child and the earlier that kid is sick, they don't want to kill them. They want them sick for the rest of their lives. And we have now a whole generation. When my uncle was president, 6% of Americans had chronic disease. Today it's 60%. When my uncle was president, do you know what the cost, the annual cost of treating chronic disease was in this country? Zero. There weren't even any drugs invented for it. Zero. Today, it's about $4.3 trillion.
When your uncle was president...
And none of it is necessary.
What was the autism rate in 1960? Do we know?
In 1960, the autism rate, it was somewhere between 1 in 1,500 and 1 in 10,000. Today, it's 1 in every 34 kids, according to CDC. And in some states, like California, I think maybe Utah and New Jersey, 1 in 22. 1 in 22 kids. And, these kids should be healthy.
Sorry about that. I think I took a drink of water while my mic was still live. Don't want to, gross anybody out. But listen to that, right? Back in the day, and I'm a boomer. Last year was the boomers. Best year in history, the Beatles came to North America, that kind of stuff. But back in the day, when he was a kid, they didn't have a lot of autism. They didn't have a lot of obesity. And now that we look at the numbers, there's a big question as to why that is. Why do we have all that? And it's amazing that we have used to be between 1 in 1,500 and 1 in 10,000 kids with autism and eventually adults, I guess. And then nowadays in places like California, it's 1 in 22. I don't know. I tried to look up the stats in Canada, but every time I Googled it, it went to the US. And when I went to Stats Canada, they don't make it overly easy to search Stats Canada. I'm not a fan of Stats Canada, to be honest. As a police officer, I used to gather stats for Stats Canada because that's what you do when you score files, and they actually legislate you to lie, in my opinion, and that's just an opinion. I mean, everybody's got a different opinion, but because of the way we collect stats, I don't think that they collect stats very honestly. But when I looked up this, when I was trying to do some research on this on the internet, to see what he was saying, because in some other clips, and I cut it out because I didn't want this podcast to be all clips. I wanted to actually have a real podcast, obviously. He says in some of his speeches and some of his interviews that the diagnosis hasn't changed, or the way they measure it and how they diagnose it. It hasn't really changed, but we just have this increased number. And that's very interesting to me, because when you look at the research that's out there, or what's published on the internet, whether it's true research or not, because of course you got to be very skeptical of what you see on the internet. But the studies that I was reading or looking at, the summaries of the studies at least, they were basically mentioning what he was saying, that a lot of the scientists are claiming that it's how people are being diagnosed. So, that the methods are better, or people are more aware of it, so they're bringing their children in. I think that might be a little bit. I think that definitely may be a factor, but I can't see that it is a real thing, and I think that it's going up. And when you talk about when he talks about how the people in charge, or the people who are doing all of this, research and development in the health industry, one of the things that is really interesting is how many scientists in the health industry, or in the food industry, I should say, and in the health industry, are former scientists from the tobacco industry. Now, let that sink in for a minute. The tobacco industry had for decades lied to the people of the world, like everybody, not just in the United States, but in Canada, all over the world, just how safe their products were. And this seems to be a theme throughout history of Canada and the United States, where we get something new on the market, or maybe it's not necessarily new, maybe it's been around for a while, but it hasn't been tested, and everybody thinks it's safe, until decades later it turns out that it wasn't safe. And obviously we saw that with tobacco, but we're seeing that with food, like artificial sweeteners, for example, not safe at all. But obviously refined sugars aren't safe either. Go without, right? Don't put sugar in your coffee. Find something else. Like I think I'm not sure what, if you know for sure what the safest form of sweetener is, put it down in the comments or in the chat. I think it's probably raw honey or something like that. But I don't think that we have. I don't think we've been told the truth about the safety of our food. I remember when I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of processed foods during the week. We had, it was all, I shouldn't really say that because morning time, in the morning, we would eat cereal, which is, I never eat cereal now. I think it's probably horrible for you because of it's basically it's a processed food. And it was all meat, vegetables, and potatoes basically. And we had a family meal every night, except for Saturdays, and we were on our own on Saturdays. We had to fend for ourselves. So it usually ended up being a hot dog night, which and hot dogs aren't really great for you, right? I mean, I don't know if at least not the stuff that we were eating at back in the day. I'm sure that there are all sorts of preservatives and whatnot in it. So we have all of these preservatives in our food and all these unnatural things. But what was really interesting is to hear him talk about how the tobacco scientists who went to work for the food companies, because the tobacco companies, when they started losing a lot of their business when people stopped smoking, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously people still smoke, but back in the 70s and where there was a big push to stop smoking, and the tobacco industry started buying out all the food industries, a lot of their scientists went to work trying to find ways to get people addicted to food. So that is, maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but that to me is scary because it means they're putting stuff in our food that shouldn't be there. And since I've basically started going on or just eating really whole foods, real meat, and vegetables, which is pretty much mainly what I eat, some fruit as well. I've cut out a lot of the carbs and stuff. I feel a lot better as far as I actually tried to go on the carnivore diet, and it was an easy diet to go on, but I need my vegetables. Even though I've never been a big fan of vegetables, I do need my vegetables. So especially for the fiber and whatnot. So, but I've really cut back on the carbs, but definitely I've cut back on the processed foods. I figure if it comes in a box, I probably shouldn't eat it. If I went and I looked up, a lot of times I'll have like these huge omelets, like dinner omelets, that I'll make out of eggs and ground beef, and I'll add in some salsa, whatnot, and some avocado. And the salsa, probably shouldn't be doing that, or I probably should make my own, which I'll get around to doing that once I have more time and all my renovations are done. But I went and I bought like that old El Paso spices to mix in your meat just to make it more flavorful, until I read the package. And it's fortunate it's cheap, but I read the package and I'm not going to put that in my meat. There's canola oil and soya in there. And you can pronounce all the ingredients, and obviously if you can't pronounce it, if you don't know what it is, probably shouldn't eat it. But guys really shouldn't eat things like soya. Matter of fact, I don't think that women should eat it as well. I'm going to play a clip here, and I think it's the longest clip I have. And RFK, in this clip, he talks about endocrine. I'm just butchering this. I'm just going to play the clip, and then we can talk about it.
The environmental movement no longer talks about toxics anymore. They don't care about it. They don't care that we're mass poisoning our children. It's so weird to me. And I saw you. For 40 years, I've been fighting to get against endocrine disruptors. Endocrine disruptors are a class of chemicals that change. They alter us hormonally, and they change they can change sexual conduct. They can change sexual development. They can affect fertility, and we've already lost 50% of our sperm count. We're having girls in this country that are achieving puberty on average between 10 and 13 years old. That's 6 years less younger than they were, 80 years ago. We have the lowest puberty levels on any continent in the world here because we're just bombarding our children with endocrine disruptors. And they're chemicals like PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, atrazine, which can turn male frogs into females and produce fertile eggs. That's how potent they are as an endocrine disruptor. And it's in 63% of our water supply.
Yeah, so that's pretty scary, that, what he was saying about the endocrine disruptors. And what was really amazing to me is how it can affect your sexuality, your sexual behavior. I'm not sure if that's true or not. It sounds a little wacky to me, but I'm not going to. I would not discount it because, they were talking about back in the day, or when I started looking into or listening to, I guess what was out there, and I just started tuning into all this kind of stuff, is that excessive amounts of soya does cause increased amounts of estrogen. And what he was talking about in this endocrine disruptors is that very thing, and hormones. Just when you start introducing hormones into your system artificially, it's just bad news. I've known a lot of people who have had illnesses because they basically started messing with their biology. People who maybe have used steroids when they were younger, and their systems, their organs start shutting down when they get a little older. I worked with one. I guess I have to call him a girl because he went through the change. But and I'm not trying to insult anybody, but you can't change your hormones, you can't, or your chromosomes and stuff like that. And nice enough person and all, but she used to be he, and going through a lot of health issues, and because it's not natural. Okay, you're putting a lot of stuff into your body, and you've because of the alterations, you're also have taking other stuff away, some natural stuff. So and don't get me wrong, you know what, if you're an adult and you want to do that, if that makes you happy, then okay, you're an adult. I'm not going to say you shouldn't, but I wonder what all of this is doing to our systems. And when you look at how just out of control crazy we've gotten in the world since the 60s, I would say, you go back to the 60s. I know a lot of people probably are tuning in and haven't been around that long. Like I remember the 70s because being born in the 60s, of course, you grow up in the 70s and 80s, and things just seem to be out of control. No other time in history have there been so many people who've been confused about who they are and what they are and wanting to change. There's always been that, but it seems to have gone nuts lately. And I wonder how much of that is on the food we eat and our environment. I noticed Akasha, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, mentioned about the air. And as a pilot, I'm not an active pilot anymore, but I remember every time I flew into Vancouver, because I used to live on the mainland, every time I flew into Vancouver, it was like I was flying into a haze. The air was clear, and then I'd start to descend after getting out of the mountains, after, coming, between Hope and Chilliwack, and I'd start to descend, and it was like a brown, pool of, just gross air. But you don't notice it when you live in it. So there's all this stuff that's out there. And, we've got that in our food, we've got that in our air, we've got that in our water. Chilliwack water, I lived in Chilliwack for a little bit, had the best water at the time. And then they started to be forced to best tasting water. I don't know how healthy it was, but it was best tasting water. And then they started, the government forced them to add chlorine into the water because they hadn't added it before. Of course, the taste quality went down. So like, what's in our environment that's causing all of these things? And what I got to think about why I chose this topic was it goes beyond what, it goes beyond just the environment and health, because it goes also to our economy, and it really shoots holes in almost everything that Trudeau is saying. I'm going to play another clip here, and it's about basically it's about the soil, and he's a big soil advocate about cleaning up our soil. And when you listen to him, it makes a lot of sense. So just listen to this clip.
The best thing that you can do for climate is to restore the soils. The soils are the solution to everything. The soil will absorb all that carbon. And it'll absorb the water. It'll stop the flooding. It'll give us healthy food. And that's what our national policy has to be.
And he goes on like this. Obviously, I'm not playing a lot of. I've cut out a lot of the clips, or cut the clips really, really short. But he makes a lot of sense. And soil, clean soil. If you don't have clean soil, you don't have clean food, and your soil isn't as productive, and whatnot. So, and I'm just reading the comments, so I paused a little bit, and Akasha was saying, have you researched how they clean the water? They, I'm not sure that they actually, I'm not sure they really clean the water, but they put stuff in it to kill, bacteria and stuff, which, I don't know, like, obviously you don't want bacteria in your water. But is that really cleaning it, or is that, just killing certain stuff in it? So I'm not really sure about that. So I think I might have actually played this clip already, because I've been just blabbing on here, but I want to play the carbon boondoggle clip again, because I might not have played it yet, but it really strikes home, this whole boondoggle thing.
And who's making the money? Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, foreign governments. And the other thing that they're funding, hundreds of billions of dollars. This is what climate has turned into, is these climate capture pipelines, and are wreaking havoc with the agricultural lands across the Midwest, stealing people's property rights with, eminent domain. And who's making the money? BlackRock. And it's a useless technology that does not work. It's just all a boondoggle. And that's what's become the environmental movement in this country. And if you depart from that orthodoxy, you're expelled from it. If you want to make Americans fight each other, talk about carbon. If you want to bring Americans together, talk about habitat protection.
I think that's really true, because we've got all this talk about carbon this, carbon that. One of the things that I was I found once I started doing my own research into it, and I encourage everybody to do their own, because I mean, if you're not doing your own research, then you're just really believing what is fed to you. But there's a guy who lives on the island here, Patrick Moore, Dr. Patrick Moore. He used to be head of the Greenpeace, and he was one of the founders of Greenpeace. But now he's been a climate activist, climate scientist for all of his professional life. And one of the things that I found interesting about what he had to say was that back before the Industrial Revolution, so in 1700s, early 1700s, the Earth was actually pretty close to extinction, natural extinction, because the carbon in the atmosphere had dropped to 180 parts per million. And when it drops to 150 parts per million, everything starts to die. But the Industrial Revolution actually brought us back from that brink of extinction, and where we naturally have a lot more carbon in our atmosphere. And some of the graphs he was pointing out, with the graph that the UN refers to was a graph that was made by a guy at it was his PhD thesis, and he manipulated the way the graph looked by squishing in the dates near the end of the graph, so it looked like there was just huge uptick in carbon that was all of a sudden, and because of that PhD thesis, we have this carbon theory that a lot of people are pushing back on now. And there was another scientist William Happer from Princeton, who was saying that we're actually in a carbon deficit and we need more carbon. I don't know what's true, what's not true. I'm not going to, take a stance on that, but a lot of what they say makes a lot of sense. But what's really curious is why most of that stuff is suppressed. And, it should be free for everybody to listen to and hear and choose for themselves. But when we focus solely on carbon, we start to ignore the other aspects of the environment, the soil and the air and the water. Because, carbon, not necessarily, it isn't the only thing that we should be concerned about, and probably is one of the least things we should be concerned about, because the historical graphs show that carbon follows temperature. Temperature doesn't follow carbon. So that was interesting when I saw that from Patrick Moore, one of Patrick Moore's presentations. That was very interesting to me. So we've got this alternate set of theories and facts from people who don't buy into the agenda that the UN and the Canadian government are giving us, but we don't get to hear it as often, and when we do listen to it, people call us names and say that we're deniers or whatever. It's just ridiculous. So we have like 400 parts per million of carbon in our atmosphere, and that varies for time of day and location. It can go up to like 1,200 or something like that, with a day. But on the average, we have like 400 parts per million. But historically, there have been times throughout history where the planet was greener, and it had 4,000 parts per million. I don't know what's right. I don't know what's good. I don't know what's bad. I'm not a climate scientist, but I'm thinking that we're focusing on the wrong things, especially for the health of our children. Because when you look at when he talks about the the autism rates and the diabetes and the scientists who came over from the tobacco industry, whose job it was to make us addicted to certain foods. That is just, to me, that's just absolutely scary and evil. It's sinister. It's diabolical. You have people who came from an industry that did a lot of harm to people, to our society, and they went into another industry, and I think that maybe they're even causing more harm, because when you look at the trajectory since the 1970s and 1960s of the obesity and of children, of adults, and the fact that they're now linking Alzheimer's into being a form of diabetes, that it's really scary that we've allowed this. And he goes on also to talk about the corruption in the NIH and different CDC, the FDA, all of these agencies, these three-letter agencies in the U.S., and how corrupt they are. How many of them are making policies for their agencies, but they're also invested in the food agency, in the food industry. So they're very conflicted. And he talks about that a lot. How much of that affects Canada? I would say a lot. And as I said before in the podcast here, I think that Canada is probably cleaner. Our environment is probably cleaner, but that's only because we have more space. But most of us live close to the U.S. border. So how much cleaner is it? Really, like we live within 200, 300 kilometers of the U.S. border. So how much cleaner is it? And back, it wasn't that long ago. I think it was like 10, 20 years ago. Acid rain, and I'm not even sure what acid rain, how much of an effect that currently has. But Canada was still, up there with the acid rain and putting all this pollution into the air. I want to be able to breathe, but I want my kids to be able to breathe as well. And if asthma, the instances of asthma is on the rise, the instances of food allergies is really on the rise. And we medicate people to an extraordinary amount. There was a part of this interview, and I've linked the interview in the description. If everything worked out, because I don't know, I have to go back afterwards and check. But if it's not in there, I'll make sure that I put it in there. But I've linked this whole interview that he did with Tucker in the description, the show notes, however you want to refer to them. And it's very interesting. Ozempic, which is now being given to kids in the U.S. I don't think that's really done in Canada, but I could be wrong. Basically, in Canada, it's my understanding, and again, I could be wrong, so correct me if I am, but Ozempic is restricted to diabetes only, so medication, whereas in the U.S. they're using it for weight control. And the country where it's developed, or where it was developed, the company that developed it is, I think it was, did you say it was Denmark or Finland? Denmark, I think it was. It was, it's actually not, it's not approved for that. And I don't think it's approved for that in Canada either. But in the States, it's approved for weight control. So that the company, the international drug company that makes Ozempic, bases their economic forecasts on how much they can sell to U.S. children. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy that they're selling this, and whereas the government of that company, where they're located, says no, We don't want that. Fix your diet and get out and exercise. You know, that is the real cure, and it's the real cure for a lot of these things. You know, I mean, we live such a sedentary lifestyle nowadays, I'm not much better, to be honest with you. I'm trying to get out more and more with the renos to the house. Sometimes I spend an entire day inside because I'm just, building things around the house to try to get it ready so the wife can move over. So I need to get out more. And when I was a kid, it wasn't that option. I mean, when I was a kid, first off, you had usually one parent at home. Most families had one parent at home, and you were not allowed to be at home most of the day. You were kicked out, and you're told basically after breakfast or come back for lunch, but definitely be back for dinner. And the rest of the day, if you weren't in school, you were outside. So in the summertime, we would get on our bikes, we would ride all over the place, and it was a different time because basically, as a kid, I could ride into Tsawwassen and cross the border, and the border officers wouldn't really care. Nowadays, I mean, they're not going to let a kid ride their bike across the border. A friend of mine, she had a horse, and she used to jump the log that was basically the border, that was blocking a road, and never thought anything of it. It wasn't a big deal. It was Point Roberts, right? Nowadays, you can't get away with that. But the point is we weren't really allowed in the house during the day. You had to be outside. You had to get your exercise. My kids aren't really like that now. Now, my wife, being Japanese, has a bit of a different perspective on things. I'm a guy, I get overruled in the house. We think that we're in charge. But when you're married, you really realize, not really. You can't really kick this generation. Really kick their kids out of the house anymore to get out and run around and do things physical. It's all online, so that's a big deal. But we also introduce all of this processed food and this addictive food into our kids' diets, and we have all of these things. We have the autism rates skyrocketing. We've got the asthma, and I think asthma is a huge thing these days with kids, and the allergies. When I was growing up, you never heard of a kid having a nut allergy. You just never did. You never heard of a kid having any real food allergies. I've got hay fever. That was one thing, but you didn't hear food allergies too much. Nowadays, everybody's got a food allergy, it seems. They're all telling you about it. And they've got other things too. Like when I was, you wonder how much of the other things are really the mental illnesses and whatnot are part and parcel of the environment. I know when I was working on the street in Surrey, I would go to a complaint, and especially on the weekends, but really every night shift, almost every complaint, every call for service I went to as a constable and as a corporal and as a sergeant, it was a mental health issue or an alcohol and drug issue. Almost every one of them. Hardly any crime, street level crime, is motivated by anything other than those three. And most of the times people would be telling you, whether they were the complainant or the suspect, they knew more about prescription drugs than I ever will, and they were street people, and they were self-medicating. They thought, self-medication is a good idea. It's not a good idea. Like cannabis, for example, actually has the same effect as soya as far as disrupting your your endocrine disruptors. They have found that, and I'm not saying like casual users or whatever, because I don't know enough to make any sort of definite statements, but I have done quite a bit of research on this while I was in university, and the chronic users, so the people who are using every day and multiple times a day, have elevated levels of estrogen. And it seems that when you look at all that research and you look at what he was talking about with endocrine disruptors, that that it has much the same effect. So, I mean, we're putting this, or some of us, not me, but some of us are putting this stuff into our bodies knowingly, and the rest of us are putting it into our bodies unknowingly when we just buy this processed food, these endocrine disruptors. And when RFK talked about sperm counts going down and fertility rates and stuff like that, I, in some of my previous videos and my previous podcasts, I talked about the declining birth rates and fertility rates. And my thought was that it's mainly an economic thing, but what if it's also a chemical thing? What if it, because he was talking about these endocrine disruptors actually changing your behavior, and because of the imbalances, maybe that is why our birth rate is below replacement. I don't know. I'm just speculating here. I have no knowledge or no special knowledge of this, but as a critical thinker, and I've done research and stuff like that, and been to university like everybody else, or like most of Canada nowadays, and have been in the investigative field for much of my life. You start to think, and you start to look for connections, and these connections seem to be there, and a lot of people don't want to recognize these connections or even consider them, because then they would have to change their way of looking at the world, their way of looking at either processed food or whatever. One of the things that I find very weird is that that people don't want to look at what doesn't fit their particular narrative of the world, because they don't want to change. So if I find out that something's not good for me, well, I'm going to probably stop doing it, or at least cut back on it, right? But a lot of people don't want that. So we have Trudeau, who seems to want to destroy us. He seems to pushing drug use, all the way from cannabis all the way up to heroin and fentanyl and all this kind of stuff that he seems to be pushing that on us. Is he? It appears to me like he is, and that's killing us. But it's also not just killing us in the sense that the people who are using those substances are harming themselves, but they're harming other people to get the money to get this. So Trudeau, what does he do? He makes it free. I mean, that's just stupid. Because as I said before, most of the crime that I was investigating, most of the calls for service were drugs and alcohol fueled, and mental illness. Mental illness being the lesser of the, I would say the lesser of those three catalysts or causes or whatever. But we're still putting that into our system, and whenever I hear those commercials about Beyond Meat, like that fake meat. I just want to, I just want to grab that, those people who are promoting it and say, are you completely stupid? Are you completely stupid to push something artificial on us? Like beyond meat. I assume that it's mainly soya based. Well, soya, if you do any research into soya, excessive soya is super bad for you. Like really super bad for you. Why would you want to do something or put something into your body that's not natural? Margarine, for example, hydrogenated oils, vegetable oils, seed oils and whatnot, super bad for you. They created margarine. Margarine was originally created to fatten up turkeys, but it killed the turkeys. So they stopped giving it to turkeys, and somebody said, hey, even though this is killing turkeys, why don't we start giving it to people, and we'll market it as being more healthy than butter. I mean, man, have we ever done some stupid things in our history, thinking that it was good for us? Artificial sweeteners is another example. How much of that causes cancer? And apparently, it's no better for you than sugar. So if you're going to be drinking 10 cans of Diet Coke a day, you might as well be drinking real Coke. Stop drinking all Coke. And this is coming from a guy who actually, I love Coca-Cola. I don't drink it now. I don't have pop now, but, that actually is a very good example of people putting addictive things into your food. Originally, Coca-Cola actually had cocaine in it. And I'm sure that they've done other things to make it addictive, because it certainly is addictive. All that kind of junk food is. As a challenge to people who maybe aren't on board with this kind of stuff. If whenever I get into a junk food kick, because occasionally I do, like I'll buy junk food for whatever reason. I just walk past it and I can't help myself. Mostly I don't. I stay away from it. And when I have junk food, I'm hungry later. I want more of it. When I have whole foods, meat and vegetables, that's not the case. Right now I'm on a 1 meal a day regimen. 1 meal a day. Sometimes I have the kind of a smoothie drink that I also make out of blueberries and lemon and whatnot. And I'm thinking about ways to sweeten that up naturally, because I also put some apple cider vinegar in it, which makes it quite bitter. But the point is, when I have the junk food, I want more of it. It's kind of like I'm a pasta nut. I love pasta, but I don't have it anymore. I can't have it anymore because I just eat too much of it, and it's addictive. And when I eat it, I'm hungry later. Coming from a family, basically Japan or Japanese culture is a huge part of my family these days, with my wife and my kids. I don't eat the rice. They eat tons of rice. I can't eat rice to the same extent, but I do like the Japanese rice. I do like that sticky rice. But I know better, because it's it's not good for me. And my wife is actually diabetes too. She's got a little bit of diabetes, and the thing that you find is that it actually does, especially with Westerners, but not so much with Japanese or Asians, because they build up an enzyme that breaks it down. But with Westerners, particularly rice, excessive rice is not good for you. And I guess nothing in excess is good for you, right? Nothing is. But it's one of those carbohydrates. I'm also a potato lover. I love potatoes. Can't eat them anymore because at my age, I'm 60 this year. It has a negative effect on my weight. I can't. And all these foods that I used to be able to eat. But when you get to all the boxed foods that they have nowadays, from your cereals, or your prepackaged foods, and all your snack foods and whatnot, and everything they put into that is where all the really scary stuff happens. If I do decide to get into a box of chips, well, it's not just a couple of chips, right? I mean, what is that? It's not salt, but salt is addictive too. But it's that other stuff. Why can't I think of it? It's really bad for you. But you find it in a lot of processed Asian foods, especially Chinese foods, and it's to get you addicted. It's all to get you addicted, and it's all harmful. So that is basically what I wanted to talk about tonight, and relating that to Canada, because I know that this is focused on a lot of what almost entirely on what RFK Jr. was saying, and he's American, and he's talking about the U.S. context. But we are very related. Most of our products on our shelves are the same as the U.S. And we have mainly the same rules as far as what's available. Health Canada barely does any of its own studies. It's too expensive to do their own studies. They rely on the FDA and the CDC and all of the health organizations in the U.S. So if there's any difference in our food, I would be very, very surprised. Very surprised. And I would imagine it's negligible. Just because, we're just so similar. And with all the health things that you see these days with food, like how many people, like I think 10 years ago, I didn't even know about gluten allergies and people who are gluten-free. Gluten-free to me means flavor-free, but still, how much of that is because of our environment and what we've been putting into ourselves since day one. And now he goes on to talk, MSG, rock girls, that's what it is, MSG. How much of that was, basically what we've been putting into ourselves since day one. RFK goes on to talk about all the toxins in our bodies. In his speech that he gave just before, in his Trump endorsement speech, and then in this interview with Tucker, he talks about all of the toxins that we have in our bodies, in every cell of our bodies, and what he wants to do to change that. And he's got a very sensible plan, it seems, very sensible plan to change that. So I think that we should really look seriously at his research, because he has been in this fight as an environmental lawyer for well over 20 years, and he's been a lawyer probably for about 40 or 50 years. So he is, and he knows, really, I think he knows what he's talking about. Now, is he a little bit off the wall in other areas? Yeah, he's done some pretty crazy things, But microplastics, yeah. So Mike was saying microplastics. Yeah, microplastics and all these other toxins that we find in ourselves. I mean, that's just crazy when you figure what we have in our bodies, because we're not eating healthy, whole foods. I always thought that maybe it never worked out for me, but I always thought that one day I would have my own little hobby farm and grow my own food and whatnot. My wife is totally against that because she grew up on a farm. So she grew up on a farm in Japan, so in her farm, they had silk. So they were a silk farm, but they were also a tobacco farm. So, so she was kind of, I guess her family was part of the problem in many aspects, not the silk aspect of it. It's funny, she hates bugs, but she thinks that the silk worms are kind of cute. But I mean, whatever. Redacted news just did a piece on microplastics. Yeah, I'm going to look that up. That would be very interesting. So before we end it here, I'm just going to go back and see, just read some of the comments and let's talk about it. Save our children, yeah. So hey, Rock Girl, listen. So you put a comment about 15 minutes before I went live, and I'm not sure how that works, but if you can, in the comments of the video, if you want to put that down, how you did that, or what's up, that would be great, because I don't really know how all this technology stuff works. As I said, I'm a boomer. And supports Trump. Yeah, I never used to support Trump. Now, I was always a conservative and would have voted for him had I been able to. But I didn't, until his first term, I wasn't convinced, because I didn't like his personality. Now I just realize his personality is not all that bad. Yeah, he says mean things about people, but a lot of it is just rhetoric that you shouldn't take seriously. And I guess because I was a police officer and I'm used to having people yell at me and spit at me and be mad at me or hate me for just existing, it just, all that stuff just kind of rolls off, right? And I don't find that a lot of what he says, I don't find it as offensive as I guess what a lot of people do. And what I also find is that there's so many lies about what he says and how they misinterpret him. And they say he lies, he exaggerates. And yeah, okay, an exaggeration is a lie, but I mean, you can tell there's a difference in what he does and what people do for him, to him. California, I'll say it the proper way, is a wacko place. It is. Used to like to go there when I was a kid because, of course, Disneyland and whatnot and Knott's Berry Farm and all those places, but I could live without California these days. I think if they got rid of all the crazies that are there and cleaned it up, then it wouldn't be so bad. I would, if I was able to, and I could convince my wife, I would probably move to either Florida or Texas or Hawaii. But then Hawaii, their gun laws aren't really much different than Canada. Canada has food with many ingredients, with many more ingredients than Europe. Why? That's a good question. And I think that's because we have an American way of, like our food industry is so tied to the U.S. And and because of those scientists and those mega food companies and how much they make. So fluorine putting it in our water, good example. You find fluorine in everything, really, a lot of things. Yeah, so they don't sell cereal in the Netherlands. I didn't know that. I haven't been there. Well, up until recently, I've always wanted to travel Europe. As close as I've got was England, Scotland, and Wales. And I loved that trip, but that was back in the 90s, early 90s. Now, I'm not so sure I would really enjoy it over there. But then again, I'm basing that on news, so I probably shouldn't base it on that. I should probably just go. I'd love to go to Europe and check it out, but I didn't know that they don't sell cereal in the Netherlands and stuff like that, and that there's so many more ingredients in our food. And Rock Girl is correct. I mean, if you can't read it, if you can't pronounce it, or if it's numbered, you probably shouldn't eat it. Nothing wrong with vegetables, just wrap it in bacon. I love it. Too many recalls on food. Yes, absolutely. It seems like almost every year we're getting some sort of a recall on food. And sometimes it's even natural whole foods, like because it's just not handled properly. I'd be interested to see if we could ever get raw milk in Canada. Not that I drink a lot of milk, but apparently you can't get it here. You can get it in certain places in the States, and it has to be a certified place where they have a lot of conditions on cleanliness. But I think the only place you can get it in Canada is if you actually live on a farm and do your own milking. But when you look at the milk, they even add stuff to our milk. They add apparently there's even, I didn't know this, but one of my good friends, she's been doing keto for a number of years. She was saying that there's even sugar in the milk, which blew me away. I didn't know that there was. Not that I drink a lot of milk anyway. So all this, the Rock Girl was mentioning all the spraying in the 70s. That's interesting because there was a couple of cases in the Lower Mainland that were very disturbing because of some kid got caught with overspray from a crop duster, and they got terribly sick. I don't know if they were able to recover, but it was just incredible. The geoengineering is another thing. Why are we modifying plants? Why are we modifying plants? So for thousands of years, we've lived relatively healthy lifestyles up until, the 1930s, 40s, whatever, and 50s, 60s, very low obesity rates, very low numbers of child diabetes, and it was natural whole foods, and you didn't have to go to a specialty store for it. You didn't have to go to some store that charges you, a month's pay just to buy a basket of groceries. It was just there, and then we started bioengineering and geoengineering and all this kind of stuff to our food, and look what's happened to us. And why haven't we figured this out? I mean, how many times do we have to do this in our history before we stop doing this? And I said it before, I'll say it again. Anybody who eats, a meat substitute, an engineered meat substitute burger is just, you're rolling the dice. It's like Russian roulette with food. It's just like, why would you do that? The hormonal imbalance, mood, soya, too much soya causes mood. And it not only disrupts your hormones, it really disrupts your moods and stuff like that. And moobs. I think moobs. That's I read it as moods, but moobs. Yeah, I know what you're saying now. Yeah. Most, if not all, soy is GMO. Corn too. Yeah. So corn. I think the only good use for corn is making whiskey. Actually, I'm just kidding. I used to love corn. I don't eat it anymore. Corn is one of those vegetables that's not really a vegetable, though. It's a starch. Yeah, whatever. A town taken over by gangs in Colorado. It's bad. Cops are gonna. I didn't know about that. I'll have to look into that. Is that just on the news, Sheila, today? Most corn grown where I live is used for ethanol. Hey, corn's good for alcohol. The trans back in the day tucked or added, but no surgeries. No one really cared. Yeah, so really, like, how much? I don't know what effect does all of these hormone endocrine disruptors have on that? I don't know. I think if the heirloom corn, I think you'd have to grow your own. Mike, hey, one of your uncles likes to dress up. Okay, must be fun at a party. Yeah, drinking from streams, crisp and clean. Yeah, you know what? We used to not have any problems drinking from streams when I was a kid. Nowadays, it seems like you probably get a little bit of bacteria, but there's ways to clean it naturally. Like there's these light things, and I've been meaning to get one where, if you're out in the wilderness, you can fill up your canteen with stream or creek water or river water, and you put this light into it, and it kills the bacteria. I'm not sure if that's good or bad or what, but I would like to try that. I don't want, because adding iodine or other cleaners to it just doesn't seem to make sense to me, because you're adding stuff, and when you're adding stuff, I just don't want to add stuff. Water treatment using aluminum and silica topped with chlorine is common. Yeah, very, very, very common. So Calgary still, I didn't know that Calgary still hasn't fixed their water problem. Now Montreal has some of the same issues. Curious. It's very curious that I used to think when we did, I was in Banff, I was working in Banff, it was my detachment, and we brought in a whole bunch of extra help because we had a G7 summit. Apparently they want to do it again in Kananaskis. And one of the things we're looking at is securing the water supply, because that's a major factor in for somebody contaminating the water supply for terrorists. So that's it's interesting that they haven't quite fixed their water supply. So yeah, we need the names of those people in Parliament, definitely. Boondoggle is a fun word, Dave. Some of these old words are starting to make a comeback. Yeah. Yeah, so they tell you to follow the science, but you can't find any. So follow the money, and that's where you find the science. Always follow the money. And when you follow it, it gets kind of scary. Because when you find out that the big companies, the chemical companies and the government, the three-letter agencies in the States and our equivalents here in Canada, they're not out for people's good. 21,000 people at a Jagmeet rally? Really? Were they, that seems like a lot for a Jagmeet rally. But okay, like, did they maybe pan the, did they pan the alley and kind of, I don't know, meld the pictures together? Moore's book, Fake Invisible Catastrophe. I don't know why I can't speak today. Was an eye-opener for me. Moore's book. I'll have to look up that. Stopped eating processed foods, lost 40 pounds. That's great. Aska. I will go up and down because what I'll do is I'll visit people and I'll start eating processed foods again. It takes me a while to get off of it. So I'll go up and I'll go down. Follow the money. So Mike says at 180 parts per million, life dies. So I thought it was 150 parts per million. That's carbon in the atmosphere, but it's right around there. I know that the world was down to right around 180 parts per million back in the 1700s. I don't think that I don't really think that our levels of carbon in the atmosphere are an issue. But that's just my opinion, and I could be wrong. Name calling is their only defense. So a lot of these liberals and these so-called environmentalists, they'll call everybody else names, but Trump has one mean tweet and they get all upset. Sorry to stop growing rice. Actually, they're paying people to stop growing a lot of times in a lot of these countries. And a lot of times, this is kind of on the same topic, but a little bit of a diversion, is China is buying up a lot of land in Canada and the United States. And the United States are starting to get wise to that and starting to put an end to it. And they're doing it through proxies because they can't buy land directly in a lot of places, in a lot of states. But I don't think that we're stopping them in Canada, and we should. And I also think we should stop people like Bill Gates from buying land. I'm a big supporter of the small farmer. I think that we should, the small farmer, the family farm is where it's at, and making it profitable for them. And if it wasn't for the convenience, because I'm lazy, I would be seeking out farmers markets and buying there. But really, I eat eggs and meat and vegetables and and stuff like that. So I should be going to the farmers markets. Should absolutely, because I'm a big supporter of small farmers. My uncle, my dad grew up on a farm, and his brother took it over, and my cousins ran it for a while. I think they've sold out most of it now because they're retiring, and their kids don't want to take it over, which is a shame. But I think it's still a small farm. I think we were really happier back in the day. I think there were less people on things like antidepressants back in the day, and antidepressants are not good for you either. Remember a big freedom? Yeah, the big freedom we had when we got a 10-speed, right? We were riding around the neighborhoods instead of staying inside all the time. And so a lot of these things that are happening with our environment are, I think, a natural cycle. like the polar shift and all that. Are we trying to say that we cause everything? We may have a small effect on it, but I don't think we're causing everything. Akasha says, talks about Reagan. Reagan was my favorite president. He could. I thought I know at the time a lot of people didn't like his policies. I liked it. I thought he was a great president. I know a lot of people didn't, but North Pole is moving to Russia 40 miles a year. That seems like a lot. Kids didn't want to be in the house. Outside and in the snow was better. Absolutely. When you were young, you wanted to be outside. I remember back when I was a kid, if it didn't snow in the wintertime, we were really disappointed because I had to spend some of my time on the prairies, but most of my time on the West Coast. Grew up on the West Coast, and used to love when it snowed. You could do so much in the wintertime. And I used to like to ski. My knees will not allow me to ski anymore. I just got a knee replacement last year, and I'm still not fully recovered. But data from Weather Canada was deleted in 2019. What? Didn't know about that. He holds contempt for Canadian. Well, who is that? He's holding contempt. I don't know. So this is all stuff I think I've read already. So Dr. Mark Hyman, probably pronouncing that wrong. Shouldn't laugh, but so he's got a book, I guess, or check him out. I'll query his name afterwards. Grew my own potatoes. We were shocked they tasted different. The best way to say it is clean, and they tasted clean. You grow your own stuff. Take a little bit of time and do it if you have the space for it. Would be great. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. I'm not going to. Wow, it's almost 7, just after 7:20. So, been at it for a while. Thanks for tuning in, guys. And I'd love to hear from you guys and share this out. Oh, by the way, my classroom is pretty much finished. I just have to clean and build a couple of tables. So if anybody is on the island and needs to take the Canadian Firearm Safety course, let them know. I do have a link in my description to my website where you can send me a message if you want to take that course. I do have to teach a course coming up because it's been almost a year, and if I go past a year, I lose my certification. I am going to be teaching a course hopefully soon to some friends of mine, if they're ever around long enough. So, but initially I'll be able to hold at least 6 students and eventually 12, and that is in my own classroom here. So if you're on the island and you need the Canadian Firearm Safety course because you want to get a gun, and I encourage everybody to take the course, not just because it helps me out, but also even if you don't want a gun, the knowledge that you learn and the BS that the government and people who are anti-gun tell you, it is so. The course does teach you a lot. One of the things, the only thing that I shouldn't say the only thing, but I don't support much of the Canadian laws as far as firearms go, because, and I used to support them a lot more until I realized that we can't trust the government. And I know that might sound weird coming from a guy who worked for the government, but I just don't trust them. But one of the things I do think is good is having that knowledge, and having that course and having the license. And once you have the license, oddly enough, once you have a firearms license in Canada, provided the gun is legal to have, it makes purchasing the gun really easy. As a matter of fact, if you're, you should lock your phone up when you have a drink, because if you, unless you want to go broke for buying handguns. Not that I've ever had that problem. But anyway, yeah. But just knowing, just having the having that knowledge, I think is good for everyone. And even people who don't want to buy guns, have taken courses, and they've taken courses from me, and they really have enjoyed the courses from me. And I've actually, and they've taken the course because of employment, or mainly, and then they got into firearms because responsible firearm ownership is, I think is a good thing, and keeping firearms out of the hands of bad guys, but allowing good guys to have it, really good. And in fact, I would go so far as to say that I would support a Second Amendment type of thing in Canada. With the at the risk of offending people, because hey, I do that sometimes just by opening my mouth. I truly believe that that our self-defense laws need to be revamped, because if you engage in self-defense and you harm somebody in Canada, you're treated more like a criminal than the person who is attacking you, and I think that's wrong. But according to Trudeau, and this is one of my many complaints about Trudeau, is he doesn't believe in self-defense, and he would rather criminals have their way with you than you to be able to defend yourself. And I think that is evil. And he's an evil person. And yeah. Anyway, that's just my opinion on that. All right, so we've gone through all the comments. Thanks for tuning in tonight. And again, share this out. And if anybody is in the area and needs a course, share out to all your friends that I'm available to teach. I'm on the island. I'm in the Duncan area. Maple Bay, North Cowichan technically, but everybody calls it Duncan. And I have my own classroom. It's going to be, it is technically up and running. So, hey, you know what? Come by, check it out. And I'll be, I'm going to try and find, if anybody knows a good way to advertise inexpensively, other than like the newspaper, then because hardly anybody reads newspapers anymore. Let me know, because I'm going to need to advertise for that, not just my website, but check out my website. Hey, share that out as well. And all that is linked in the show notes in the description below. And thanks for tuning in again, and we will see you next week. And I'm hoping to get more videos out, but again, I'm doing a lot of renovations to the house, and I've really slowed down in the videos since I've recovered from hand surgery, so I've been doing that. Anyways, hope to see you, or hope to be with you next week. Talk to you later. Where's the closest airport to Duncan? Nanaimo, I would say, is the biggest closest airport. There's smaller airports around, but Nanaimo is.